Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, and I am here today to bring you guys my ban list prediction for what will theoretically be the May 2022 ban list. Of course, we don't know the exact date of when the list will be coming out, but it definitely feels like it could be anytime within the next couple of weeks, or knowing my luck, it'll be as soon as this video goes live, but that's beside the point. Anyways, there are a couple of changes that I think are going to happen on the upcoming list that I want to go over. I will probably be wrong about 90% of it, so you guys can roast me after, but we will see if my prediction ends up being more or less accurate than Tombox's. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Okay, so starting off with the ban section as usual, I don't think this is a surprise to anybody. We have Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda. I think that right now the fusion mechanic is just way too strong, with all of these cards allowing you to fuse using materials from your deck, especially since now most of the time the materials you dump are actually generating you a ton of advantage and extending your combos, in addition to that fusion monster that you summon out being ridiculously strong. Verte Anaconda definitely seems like a no-brainer to me, since I feel like every deck is always just looking for ways to abuse this card in order to get into Dragoon, DPE, or some sort of branded fusion monster. Without Verte Anaconda in the game, we will see some more diversity in terms of like strategies for a lot of different decks, which is definitely healthier for the game. Now, from a product perspective, this also makes sense, as we just got a gold rare reprint of Verte in Eldorado, which has brought this card's price down considerably, so using it in some future product isn't too much of a concern. The one thing that makes me want to think that they won't hit this card is that Dragoon is getting a reprint in this year's Megatins, and they might want to keep Verte around as a way to consistently bring out Dragoon. However, I do think that Verte has just made these crazy fusions a little bit too accessible for the last couple of years, and it is finally time for the card to be banned. Next up, I feel like this one isn't too controversial either. We have Artifact Scythe banned. Now, I do think that this is more debatable than Verte, just because Artifact Scythe hasn't seen too much in terms of competitive success recently. I think we only really see it in decks like Phantom Knights, which have kind of fallen out of the meta recently. However, I still feel like Scythe is a bit too strong of a card given its accessibility with Artifact Dagda, as well as how easy it can be to trigger Scythe's effect yourself. The ability to lock your opponent out of their extra deck is basically telling your opponent that they can't play the game at all for the turn, which theoretically sets you up to OTK your opponent the following turn, and as a result, it just feels like Scythe promotes a lack of interaction between you and your opponent. Given the other hits that we have on this prediction list, I think that hitting Scythe is necessary to prevent people from just falling back to Scythe Turbo early on in the upcoming format. If there's no Verte Anaconda and Fusion to end on, people will look into just ending on Hulk with Dagda, stunning your opponent out for their turn, and then going into Baron for free. I do understand people pointing out that the card isn't problematic at the moment, but in order to keep the game healthy going into the next format, I think that banning Artifact Scythe is another pretty easy call. Okay, so we're on to what might be a bit more of a controversial call. I have Prank Kids Meow Meow Mew getting banned on the upcoming list. Now, I know that the general thought process here with Prank Kids is that it's not necessarily the Prank Kids themselves that are too strong, but it's the Adventurer token stuff with it. And to an extent, I do think that's correct. Without the Adventurer stuff, Prank Kids wouldn't be nearly as good in the current format as they are. However, I don't actually think that the Adventurer token package is going to be hit at all this list. It's just way too new, and it's so popular that I feel like Konami is definitely going to use it as a selling point in some upcoming reprint set in order to push a particular product. That being said, Adventurer Prank Kids has seen a lot of competitive success recently, and while we could do something like hitting Place or Dodo Doodle Doo, I think that hitting Meow Meow Mew is the right hit. Basically, this card allows any single Prank Kids monster to become an entire combo, and while there are a lot of archetypes that use their Link 1 monsters to get combos going, none of them do it quite the same way that Meow Meow Mew does it. By banning this card, Prank Kids will definitely fall out of the game, which I kind of think is the point. Konami has reprinted basically all of the Prank Kids cards in Maximum Gold Eldorado, and they are such an old archetype, it isn't really helping Konami to sell any more product at the moment, so there really isn't too much of a reason to keep them in the game. Rather, if they hit the Prank Kids, they can encourage people to look at using the Adventurer token cards with other newer strategies, theoretically something that will help to move other products. So yeah, this might seem like a bit of a stranger hit, but I feel like Konami is going to do something like this rather than hit the Adventurer token package directly. Alright, and finally here we have the last banned card on this prediction list. We have Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. So I know there are a lot of people wanting Halqifibrax to get hit as a way of preventing so many other cards from being on the list, right? Which is kind of fair. If Hulk were banned, we could see cards like Glow Up Bulb, Jet Synchron, O-Lion finally come back off the list. However, this is a ban list prediction and not a wish list, and I really don't think that they're going to hit Halqifibrax anytime soon. Even when we look over at the OCG, they have Hulk limited, and to be honest, that could happen here, but I don't think it really does all that much since most builds are just going to play the one copy of Halqifibrax anyways. Aside from that, there are two cards that I could potentially see being hit, Auroradon, and then Deskbot001 was the other one I considered. And really, I just feel like Auroradon is more likely to be hit given that it isn't a brick in the main deck, but rather is always accessible being an extra deck monster. The card is seeing more play in the current format. We have Sword Soul, Adventurer Tenyi, and some of those based pile decks, all using Auroradon with Deskbot 001 to get easy access to cards like Yazi, Shooting Riser Dragon, and Baron, and sometimes it does feel like Auroradon just makes these combo lines incredibly streamlined and overly simple to execute. By banning Auroradon, you are forcing these decks to show a little bit more variety and giving a slight hit to those aforementioned decks. Not that any of them are necessarily a problem in the current format, but it helps to bring their power level down, given that we are hitting a variety of decks on this list and probably don't want to leave anything completely untouched that could just take over the entire format. Okay, so we're on to the limited section, and I have two cards getting hit to 1, as well as two cards being unbanned. The first getting hit is Super Polymerization, which I feel like is more of a precedent sort of thing. Whenever we enter a format with really strong fusion-based decks, I feel like Super Poly can just be overly strong, especially given that it's a quick play, especially in Despia, right, where you can use Super Poly to fuse monsters on either side of the field away during the mirror match. It's kind of silly, since not only can you help your monsters dodge your opponent's interruptions, but if you time it right, you can make it so that your opponent doesn't really get to use their monster's effect either. Super Poly always feels like an overly one-sided card. If a player can use it at just the right time, they get to clear an opponent's entire board while giving themselves a really scary monster to use as well, and your opponent not having a chance at all to respond just seems a little bit too strong. Now, to be fair, I could also see them leaving Super Poly at 3 as a way to keep the branded Despia deck in check, since it is one of the better cards to side against the strategy if you have room in your extra deck. However, this card just feels like it's way too one-sided for me to be okay with leaving 3 copies of it running around in everyone's deck, so I feel like hitting this card down to 1 would definitely be the correct choice. One other card being hit to 1 here, I have Fusion Destiny. So at first this seems unnecessary given that we have Verte Anaconda getting banned. However, I do think that hitting Fusion Destiny is still necessary, and that's just because of how strong the DPE package really is. The release of Mirror Jade does help to cut down the power of DPE a little bit, since when you have Mirror Jade on the field, you kind of just dare your opponent to use that DPE effect so that you can chain Mirror Jade to it and banish the DPE. However, you've now burned the Mirror Jade's effect, and you also have Celestial and Dasher in the graveyard. Celestial is basically like a free draw 2. Even though you've lost advantage and momentum with your DPE now being off the board, you can gain it right back through the materials that you dumped off of Fusion Destiny, which is kind of broken. When I think about it, if I were playing something like Sky Striker, I would still play the DPE package with Fusion Destiny at 2 and Verte banned because of how much potential advantage it can net me. By putting Fusion Destiny to 1, you make the engine a lot riskier to use. You can't get all of the bricks out of your deck anymore with just Verte, so if they ash your Fusion Destiny, those bricks are still stuck in there. I think that realistically, limiting Fusion Destiny does kill off the DPE engine, at least for decks other than heroes. It will mean that we'll stop seeing DPE in like 50% of the top cut decks at the next event. The argument against hitting Fusion Destiny is that the Megatons this year should theoretically include a reprint of DPE, right? So for that reason, I could see Konami wanting to keep DPE as a relevant engine in the game for a little bit longer, because that could help them to push more product later on in the year, so it would be understandable for Fusion Destiny to stay at 2. But in terms of the health of the game, I think it makes a lot more sense if we see Fusion Destiny hit to 1 in order to tone down the power and consistency of the DPE package. So onto the limited cards that are coming back into the game, and this is honestly like my favorite part of every ban list because it causes so much changes on the market. The first card we have here is Denglong, first of the Yangzing. So I feel like Denglong is still a strong card, but it's not nearly as crazy of a card as it was when the card was first hit. Sure, you can use it and make it and search for 9 pillars as a negation, that's just one negate. And sure, you can dump a worm to the graveyard when this card is on the field, but I don't really see how something like Sword Soul is going to abuse Denglong or go into Denglong in the first place. We have cards like Vessel and Circle, and then we can make Monks. Are we really afraid of Denglong being used to dump like a Tenyi into the graveyard? Denglong is still really cool. I just think that overall the game has changed a lot, and this card isn't nearly as strong now as it was before. Let's also remember though that in Ghosts from the Past 2 we actually saw several Yangzing cards get reprinted, and while we didn't see any of the monsters there, we did see the counter trap. Those reprints felt really out of place, so they might be a nod to the upcoming ban list and tell us to expect to see Denglong back in the game once again. I think that this would be a pretty cool card to see come off the list. It wouldn't really have too much of an impact in terms of the game's competitive landscape, but it's a bone to throw for some more nostalgic players, and I feel like honestly this card could be peeled off of the list at any time. The other limited card that I have coming back to the game is another thing that I don't think will have much of an impact on the meta at all, but is something that a lot of players would welcome back with open arms. It is Orchest Harp Horror. So Orchests are definitely nothing like they were before. The boards that even full power Orchests could make kind of feel like nothing compared to some of the boards and the overall power of cards that we see in the game today. Besides, it's not like we're bringing back Mermaid or anything like that, right? So yeah, overall, the cards I'm thinking might come back aren't anything too crazy or game-changing, but they would encourage people to build and experiment with some older decks and strategies, combined with more recent support, to see if these older decks can keep up with the newer ones. Okay guys, so for the other cards, it is just the semi-limited and unlimited cards. Basically here we're looking at cards that could slowly get peeled off of the list, since I think we all know that there are a ton of cards that could get removed from the list that wouldn't really make a difference to the game at all. Really, it's just a matter of when Konami is going to feel like making these changes. So I'm not going to waste too much time going over every single one of these in that much detail. Pretty self-explanatory. Astrograph and Destrudo went to 1 recently. Neither of them is doing anything in the game. They are fine to go to 2 or even to 3. A Hero Lives, Heroes are doing nothing. Salamangreat's Circle, Salamangrates are doing nothing. Scapegoat did go to 2, but we are not playing Pure Trickstars anymore, and Lynx didn't just come out into the game, so we're not really worried about those goat tokens. And Night Assailant is whatever. Supposedly, it's errated now so that you can't target Night Assailant with its effect and loop them. I think that even if you could, no one's really making a big deal about it. Anyways guys, that is it for my ban list prediction video. If you guys are watching this video and the ban list is already out, well, my timing might just be as impeccable as ever, but do let me know what you guys' thoughts are about this upcoming list, as well as what you guys liked or didn't like about my prediction list and what you guys would do differently. If you guys did enjoy today's content, then make sure that you guys hit that thumbs up button, and of course also smash the subscribe button to get all of me and Tombox's latest videos. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.